Jesus, 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 it's fire. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time. Ain't nobody got time. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time. Ain't nobody got time. Ain't nobody got time for that. I said, Lord Jesus is fire. I said, Lord Jesus is fire. I said, Lord Jesus, 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 Jesus is fire. Ain't nobody got time for that.
decided it wanted to build a wall. Ray and Deanne Luke couldn't believe it. Their family had been farming this South Texas land for nearly 100 years, until the notice came the government was taking it.
I was very angry, and I just kept saying to Ray over and over again, how can they do that? How is that possible in the United States that they can do this? Put up a fence in front of our land and then keep us in here, lock us in. I didn't understand. I was very floored and flabbergasted.
That was almost 10 years ago, and the Loops, like hundreds of other landowners, thought they could fight. They lost. The government paid them a settlement and took the land it needed to build this fence, cutting their farm in two.
It essentially left us no property on the U.S. side of the border wall, including my house, my residence. Everything was behind on the Mexican side of the U.S. border fence.
Unbelievably, these American citizens were locked out of their own country. Their farm ended up on the south side of the border fence, still on U.S. soil, but wedged between the fence and the border with Mexico. Their only access to the rest of the U.S., a locked gate.
There's not really words to describe it. We've learned to live with it, but when you come and you enter the border gate, you punch your code in, and you come behind the border wall, there is a feeling of isolation.
A few months ago, the family found out just how isolated they really are. In the middle of the night, a fire broke out, and as the fire raged, fire engines were slow to get there, hampered by that border fence.
And I kept standing there yelling, where are they, Ray? I had called 911. She was clear. She heard me on the call. She knew where I was. But they couldn't get in here, according to our neighbors. They said the fire trucks kept driving up and down the street. We heard the fire trucks.
The family got out, barely, but not their pets.
Tell them, Dingo.
We had a little miniature goat. He was on fire, and he was running out of the structure screaming because he was burning alive. Everything was gone. He told me, you cannot go back in for this. So we all stood in the yard, and we had to listen to their cries, burning alive, and we couldn't go back in and save them.
The Loops story is part of a CNN analysis of 442 lawsuits filed by the U.S. government against American landowners. Property owners either fought to keep their land or tried to get more money than the federal government was offering under eminent domain. In most cases, the CNN analysis found those landowners lost the battle. And a decade later, 93 of the lawsuits are still in court. What did all those landowners get? A total of $78 million, the fair market value to cover 654 miles of current border fence land the government took. But what happened 10 years ago in mostly desolate, dry ranch land will be nothing compared to what's about to take place. President Trump's recent executive order to expand the border wall could stretch into more highly populated areas. It will bisect even more farms, golf courses, resorts, and ranches. Hundreds of miles of wall and hundreds, if not thousands of landowners will be forced to sell their property to the government. Former Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Ralph Foster says expect huge, prolonged legal battles.
Particularly in the urban areas, it's going to be very complicated. It's going to be, it's not a popular idea. And like I said, individuals are not happy when, they lose part of their property.
The Riverbend Golf Club and Resort in Brownsville, Texas is bracing for the worst. The fence is already here, on the right and the left. If the government decides to finish it, it will cut the resort in two.
70% of our
Are you fucking kidding me?
On the south side of the wall. That would affect 15 of our 18 holes of the golf course and over 200 residences.
Jeremy Barnard is the general manager and says residents here will fight for the fair value of their property.
I don't think anybody here is just going to hand over their property.
Pat Bell is one of them.
What happens here means everything.
Like almost everyone CNN talked to along this border, Bell is a Trump supporter. But she does not support a wall, especially one that would essentially move her home to the Mexican side of it. She says fences and walls don't work, which is exactly why she plans to fight for her property.
So absolutely, I would go to the people that are in charge, and you hate to say I would get a lawyer, but if it come to that issue and you had to, you would.
They'll, like thousands of other property owners along this border, nervously wait the final design, placement, and eventual legal notice that the U.S. government is coming to take away their land.
Go to the people that are in charge, and you hate to say I would get a lawyer.
Why is it? First of all, why is it that my dog's an asshole? Ah! I don't know what the hell my kid is downloading on her phone. Some kind of fucking slot machine looking thing, making me think there's a device just sitting there powered on for no reason. No, it's apparently the screen saving charger thing. Fucking whatever. Anyways, why does every Trump supporting woman who isn't just, a paid television spokesperson somehow look like, I don't know, some sort of an ogre with blonde highlights? Just every single one of them. Every single one of them. They look like self-loathing people. They look like, coincidentally enough, Russian crones, babushka ladies. And they have, in large part, been used much the same way, just like this poor woman has been used. And I'm sure she went around there during election season, saying every mean thing she could think of about people who want to, act like Christians instead of boast of Christianity. It's just fascinating. Like racists say, like, all black people or all Mexicans look alike or whatever. Tell you what, to me, I've never seen a group of people that look more all alike than fucking Trump supporters and maybe Putinites.
But if it come to that issue and you had to, you would.
Wait, that sounds like mock verbal reggae music. A Putinite, 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 a Putinite. You shake my love and you rattle my brains. Putinite. Okay, anyways.
They'll, like thousands of other property owners along this border, nervously wait the final design, placement, and eventual legal notice that the U.S. government is coming to take away their land.
Drew joins us now. So, to be clear, Drew, no notices have gone out yet to property owners, but if the president does go ahead with the wall, how would things then unfold?
Anderson, if history repeats itself, landowners will be forced to sell their property to the government, lose their land, and not be paid what they think that land is worth. We have done an extensive analysis of all the lawsuits It came out of the 2006 border fence expansion. And what we found, Anderson, is that property owners who fought the government to keep their land always lost. And the government offered them thousands of dollars less than what the land was worth. That's for more than 400 lawsuits. The people lost
And no
their
property
land, lost their
dispensations.
court battles, and got paid less than what they wanted to do.
It's just a sad day in America.
An eventual legal notice that the U.S.
We're part of America. We need representation and protection. Not a fence. Don't mess with Texas. You don't need representation. You know what you need? First of all, you need to replace that flag right there, unless it's like poetry, you know, like some sort of artistic statement. The broken flag. We are broken as a people, you know. But you know what they really need? According to this particular group of people who thinks they're so much better than us, that they have convinced themselves that they should decide our fate for us. I think, clearly, if they're so much better than us, we should be more like them, right? Because they're smarter, right? They're the superior master race. They're the nation that shall inherit. Yeah. You know what we need? We need a man like Putin. You know, even I can get caught up in this idea of inferior people doing shitty things, somehow equating to some rivalry, some actual competition. And then I remember that there's a thing that exists in, like, the real world. And this thing is called a man like Putin. It's a song. I wonder if these very, very special people have been shown some sort of news segment where it talks about how this girl just had to write this song. Some girl was actually sitting around, like, not just a dumb meth whore, okay? A girl that can write songs. You know, presumably you're dealing with someone with an IQ of at least 108 at this point. But I wonder if there's people who think it's believable somewhere in Russia. They're just like, Kool-Aid, you know? That actually think that the song, A Man Like Putin, is a real song. You see, everything that you can say about America, even today, even if Trump had full support, as much of, like, if he was just, you know, just doing the most belligerent shit possible, and all of America was like, yeah, look at him go, fuck it. We still, nothing that could be said about us. Nothing, nothing about us at that point means anything. Nothing even compares to the simple fact that the song A Man Like Putin is a thing. It's an actual thing, an actual reality. These fucking people, there are actual people, like with brains and noses and faces and eyeballs and ears and heartbeats and presumably people that can actually read. That sit there in Russia and get drunk and listen to this state propaganda, brain-melting bullshit. A man like Putin. Without even realizing for a second perhaps history is repeating itself. You see, what it would take for we ignorant Americans to actually be as dumb as Russians, actually be even on a comparable level, let alone at this point where we should be judged by them. We would have to let Putin, Trump, whichever one, we would have to let Trump stay in office for more than 2 terms. Let him invade and occupy foreign territory. And anyone who opposed him would get put on trains and nobody would ever hear from them again. And then it would get all undone and we'd all get told about what the fuck happened to us. And then we voted for Don Jr. Then we would only be at a comparable level. We would only be in the same arena of stupidity. relevant to the quote-unquote Russian people. To actually be remotely as stupid and actually, like, you know, begin to catch up, we would have to do this for 400 years straight. Just again and again. Oh, look, there's a powerful guy. Let's worship him. Oh, there's another powerful guy. Let's worship him. Oh, he's powerful. I support him. You know, even if you just look at the history after it was clearly established that this eastern land had been conquered by the Horde and that these white tribes were slave tribes, and that their minds, their beliefs, their motivations, their allegiances were not their own. But since then, you've had one ruler after another committing acts of treachery against Europeans, against their own people, against their neighbors. Did I mention against their own people? And I mean, you've got people like Stalin, and like Ivan the Terrible, and this really thin layer of bullshit covering it all up. I mean, it just doesn't take much of just, you know, just a whiff of the outside world to realize the only reason why we're sitting there singing this song, A Man Like Putin, is because a generation ago, people that were too smart to sing this song got fucking sent off in trains to Uzbekistan. Just like a bunch of Ukrainians got sent in 2014. But I'm sure the Orthodoxers and the Seventh-day Adventists got told it was just taters. Right? We're just making tater salad. Didn't say anything about the actual Christian, some Jewish, some even Catholic Ukrainians that did not support the Russian occupation of Crimea, that were just fucking grabbed on the street, pushed into a car, and never to be seen again. You see, if that shit happened here in America, oh, there'd be a problem.
And as brainwashed as Fox News might have some people, you'd even see old post-menopausal, I don't give a shit anymore, fake and bake or too much sun and the fun in the sun ladies even be sitting there like, wait a minute. You know, the liberals, the Democrats, blah, blah, blah. But this is the kind of shit that doesn't happen. This is the kind of shit we don't allow. And that's why we haven't had anyone like Trump succeed. That's why Trump will ultimately not be successful. And that's why this is actually a healthy, productive period in American history. This is actually a needed wound that will make us stronger. If you don't stop typing, I'm gonna just have you muted and not even bother responding. I don't appreciate off-topic spamming. I have a message to deliver, and you know, if you'd like to say hello and introduce yourself, that's one thing. But please, don't spam me. So anyways, if the American people take a look at their history, there are great percentages of people, you know, roaming in the range of 2 to 6% who have participated in or supported some really shitty things in our past. But the thing about America, first of all, not only has it not had any massively supported genocides, none. You have locally committed and then nationally condemned local, very specific things that can be called genocide. And of course everybody thinks about Custer, but they don't think about the whole story. Nobody ever thinks about the whole story regarding Custer. Excuse me 1 second. Yeah. Wow. What a moron. All I saw was Lucifer disguised as the Virgin Mary. You need a man like Putin, don't you? You fucking moron. Oh, Jesus Christ. You know, I've actually managed to prevent myself from registering what the words Hegelian dialectic mean unless somebody actually uses the term properly. Like when Rachel Maddow says it, I know what it means. When these fucking people say it, I just don't even know what it means anymore.
I do not think this word means what you think
I do
it
not
means.
think this word means what you think it means. So I'm just like, meow. Cool. I love America. My wife's gonna go get me cigarettes because the neighbor gave us $10. We have like a village thing going over there. We're just always just, you know, groceries, money, cat litter, dog food. Or dog food right now. Dog litter and cat food? No, wait. What the fuck is that? Oh, there was a cigarette down there. So anyways. Howdy, Yachiru. Anybody with a bleach-oriented screen name is very welcome here. I appreciate you joining. I think I'll just read Hegel instead. Thanks. Yes, thank you for joining. Oh. And thank you for your stylish contribution to the specialness. Why are you wearing my favorite t-shirt?
Because it's yours.
You want this one? It smells like me. You see, there was this guy, you might have heard of him, his name was Jesus, and he said, it's okay to worship the goddess. In fact, he said there would not be any harsh judgments to even those who worship the Archangel Gabriel.
Do you want some of these? Bobby left those for me.
No.
Alright,
Okay. So anyways, back on topic. What you've had, basically, historically, generationally, over the past several decades, centuries, actually, is a group of people here that have seen for themselves massive evil, have seen it perpetrated by their own leaders again and again throughout history. And the bedrock of their history is this: the time when Kievan Rus was invaded by the Horde, and then supposedly Moscow to the rescue. And that is a really simplistic version of the story, but I've heard it over and over again. Laney! The kitten's meowing at the door for Mama. I don't even know it's in the chat anymore. I went ahead and just hid the window because I don't have time for that right now. Ain't nobody got time for that. I said, Lord Jesus is a fire. Now, you can go ahead and stay tuned because I'm going to embarrass you in a second. I swear to God Almighty, everything you say is nonsense, and I'm going to prove it. And let that just be for those who don't understand that every time I ever speak, I am writing the law. Anyways. So back in our country, in America, about 130 years ago, we had some disgusting people doing disgusting things. And as a nation, we began to heal. We began to better ourselves. We had a civil war. And we had waves of progress, and we had waves of aggression. And then we had a period in which we were required to set aside our differences and save the world from fascism. You might have heard about it. It was called World War II. And before this time period, one of the things that enabled us to be rational, multi-perspective, coherent, compassionate people. The thing that allowed us to take responsibility for the safety of the world was what made the difference between 130 years ago and 100 years ago. And that difference actually became even more prevalent in the 70s and 80s. Another wave of the same thing, called immigration. You see, the thing about America is there's no such thing as American. None. This was the uncharted land. And I know everybody's getting triggered right now to think there's Native Americans. But I offer anyone to debate the definition of that with me. The oldest skull found in the Americas was Caucasoid. And you have evidence of Pacific Islander migration. You have evidence of Mongolian migration. And you have the evidence of ancient Celtic migration. all happening in waves in different ancient time periods. But the fact of the matter is, the reason why colonialism was a thing is because most of the civilized, powerful, economically interactive world had established documentary treaty, embassy-based recognition. And if you were just a small tribe somewhere at the time of this happening, you were going to get used for your resources no matter what color you were, no matter what color the people who wanted your shit were. Because from this time period, going back 2,000 years, the world has been at war with the same people from this area. You see, it's not just Stalin. Fucking. The interesting little list of czarist leaders, shit like that. This goes all the way back to before Attila the Hun. You know where Attila the Hun was from? Fucking Georgia. Gorgonia. And it is these people who surrounded all of Europe, who established khanates and allied themselves with the pseudo-democratic version of a khanate, which is called a caliphate. And since the time of the First Celtic Empire, this same force from the land of Media, which means the middle, have kept coming and coming and coming. And you see, these are different maps provided by bullshitters. They don't illustrate the unity between these places. They don't illustrate the cooperation or the simple fact that all of the weapons of all of these places we're supposedly afraid of all come from Russia today. And if you want to understand the nature of our brainwashing, you need to understand who was in power when we were given. That date is not accurate. I filled that in. That was a map of the Horde plus communist area influences. Now, if you want to know about where Phoenicians came from, you need to ask historians why they don't talk about this part of Greece, quote-unquote Greece. When you wonder about what happened to the matriarchal Athenians, here is your answer. If you wonder why Russian written language looks like Greek written language, why the people are so similar all the way to Armenia, you have your answer. This is not the Greek Empire. That was Alexander's conquest of the Silk Road. That was Alexander's trade empire. That's why it worked. That's why it lasted throughout history. That's why what used to be the most commerce-traveled, knowledge-filled city on Earth was renamed Alexandria. But you never wondered how the hell Alexander from that little bitty part of Greece conquered all that, did you? You never asked the simple question, where the fuck did he get all those troops? I mean, if you do the math based upon the land productivity and the population sustainability of the area, basically, if you basically just put it in a Civ 2 simulator, you come up a little bit short. A little tiny bit. Like outnumbered 500 to 1 kind of short. Yeah, 500 at least to 1. So where did he get the troops? Where is the nearest force? Well, you see, let me just zoom in on this again for people who haven't learned these lessons yet, even though I've taught them repeatedly. If you look at how we've been taught history, we can verify what the CIA has already told us, that our educational and religious institutions have been infiltrated. Look at Crimea. Look at where it says Scythians, okay? Now, a very helpful word has been used at the top of this particular map called Sarmatians. I don't know if that rings a bell these days, but it certainly does for me. You might wind up reading a lot of European history that references the Sarmatians without really understanding how powerful they were. You see, from the time of the diaspora, that is, the release from captivity of the Jews, the area in the top left of the map, which was occupied by sons of Noah, and had been since it dried out. It began to be sort of a border town. Okay. Literally referred to as the borderlands. And we had a situation much like many borders today. And this, in fact, really gave rise for the first need of non-wartime borders, quote-unquote wartime borders. You had the immigration that led to the establishment of the Polish people, and I use that term very, very loosely. Because Poland is what we called that area in Ukraine, all the way up to Poland and Belarus. Before any of this happened, and people who, were, I guess, as stubborn as I am, all the way through until the 15th century, would refer to that area as Poland. All of Ukraine. Everything except for Crimea. But from the times of the Babylonian and Persian conquests, which all conveniently ignore the same areas, all of them, every historical map just about that you ever see just either paints a big gray area up in the top, or just doesn't want to tell you anything about it, or just says it's tribal. Just pay no attention to the people over in that corner. As if there's just African desert out there, or something equivalent. And just like these anti-Muslim propagandists who want you to focus on that religion, just like the liberal propagandists who want you to focus on Christianity, everybody who works for Horde or Soviet intelligence doesn't want you to know the same things. They don't want you to know why America exists in the first place. And it's the same reason. We exist for the same reason. And we are infiltrated and divided. And all of our problems exist for the same reason. That corrupted the Bible in a demonstrably chauvinist way. And the people of the horde who commit genocide and enslave, and who have, for generations, failed to overturn these greedy people who use religion, who use belief, to get people to fight so that they can divide and conquer. No matter how many thousands of years they've done it, these people cannot get clued in. What used to be the tribes of Benjamin, Ephraim, and Manasseh, what used to be the simple tribes of Gog and Magog, all were enslaved, 1 by 1, 2 by 2, 3 by 3 sometimes. Set against each other, weakened, manipulated. Their history targeted. Their temples targeted. Their very foundational scriptural scrolls targeted. But there is one proud boast of the serpent that gives away the horde and all of its deceivers and minions. Whether it's the leftists being turned against religion, or whether it's people being corrupted within their own religion, on one side you have Trumpism, on the other side you have, the over-amplification of the Me Too movement. I think the Me Too movement can be a healthy thing, but obviously it can't go too far. But no matter what side, and this is another, not only the generations upon generations of slaughtering fucking oppressive wannabe god-like fascist dictators. Not only do you have the far, you don't just have the obvious history, okay? You have a current, existing, logical, obvious fucking trail On the one hand, these people are sending money to televangelists in America and trying to influence the NRA and shit like that. And on the other hand, they're the ones who have been behind all the annoying fucking liberals for fucking 30 years. And they still persist with this. They still play both sides. It's the Democrats who are saying the Bernie people are being influenced by the Russians. And the Trumpists are being influenced by the Russians. The Democrats are the only ones speaking sense right now. It's the Democrats who are saying, maybe the Me Too movement's gone a little too far in some areas and we need to watch out. You know. It's just called being reasonable people. That's why they're Democrats. And the Russians, the very people who will sit there and tell you that women belong in the fucking kitchen. On the other side of their forked tongues, they want to keep Democrats from being centrists. Well, you know these people. It doesn't matter which side they're on. They were easy to spot recently because they were all just like, but Hillary! Just remember, you know, she's not really a spy. He's just a simple tailor. So it's these charming people still exhibiting the same behavior. If you were to develop an FBI psychological profile on their deity, on the god of war, self-professed Attila, sword of Mars. Oh, you might also understand why they suppress any religion that believes in reincarnation, or any group that understands the idea that mankind was created in God's image. And therefore, if you're looking for God, chances are he's going to pop up in the form of a what? A human. And if you look at the pattern of things throughout history, when you find someone who claims to be or is true to this form and is accredited as such, you don't find someone who wants power. You find someone who wants people to have power. You see, if someone is going to be the voice of God, then they're going to understand what the definition of God's children is. What do you want from your children? You want them to grow the fuck up. And I don't just mean, develop metabolically. I mean, you want them to be hopefully smarter than you. You want them to be hopefully more successful than you. It takes a pretty arrogant person and generally a pretty shitty parent to think that their children should never rival them. A truly good parent, a truly humble person. The type of person who, for instance, takes their shopping cart and puts it back where it belongs so that somebody else doesn't have to do their own shit for them. Those type of people. Generally speaking. I got a word for them. They're called real Christians. They're called good people. They're called Westerners. And there are even a great many of them in Russia. In fact, I would dare to assume that there are a great many of them even in Mongolia. Because this is not a genetic attribute. This is a call of the spirit that cannot be silenced. It's like Jiminy Cricket, man. You'll never catch that little fucker. And for generations, we, the people who resisted up in this little corner of the galaxy over here, we get targeted left and right, all the way up, since the time of lost history. And the dawning of recorded history. Oh, look, Huns. I mean, are we supposed to think it's in the water? You know, like, is there just like some kind of addictive substance that grows out there that makes these people like just a bunch of crackheads? I mean, there kind of is, but poppies? But let's just say, you know, crackheads don't tend to be that organized. The most they might pull off is your shoes, you know? And then, right around the time when we were told to reject everything that we found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, right around the time that we were told to reject scrolls that were preserved outside of Alexandria, when we were given a compiled, translated Bible, unlike the previous English translations of the time, this is very important to take in context, the previous translations of the time were provided to English people by sultans. So think about what they would have been expecting. Think about what they would have already considered knowing. I mean, do you think these English people spent most of their time reading in Latin and Greek and Hebrew once they had an English Bible? I mean, they said it's translated accurately, right? Well, even with the grain of salt that you would take that with, the laziness, the complacency. It would lead the most powerful and wealthy people over a generation or two to commission what they at that point would see to be the most proper version of the Bible. And that's exactly what happened in this exact time frame. And that is where you get the King James edition. And by the way, I haven't read a single thing that person has said yet. And I don't really need to fulfill my little oath. In fact, technically I already have, but I haven't even gotten to the good stuff. In fact, I'm just kind of, this is all just really a long segue to it. As much of a no-brainer it is for, like Trumpists, and even especially liberals, like the Samantha Bee people of the world, As obvious as it should be to those people that influences from this area should generally not be trusted. It's not like racist, it's like geographist or something. Instead of people like just, you ain't from here, we don't like you. Oh, you're from that one place, we don't like you. No matter what the fuck you look like. You better learn to act like normal people or move along there, sonny boy. So, if you look a little deeper into the history around this time period, from basically 1200 to 1500, not only do you have, this little myth happening, and you might notice this is Encyclopedia Britannica, this is not just some guy on the internet's map. No, I did not caption anything on this map. I have not edited this map in any way. But you see, in this time period, just pull these other little maps back up. That is a photograph of my television on the YouTube video with that Dr. what's his name guy. Why Are We Afraid? And here's the opposing shot that I took of the Crusade battles. And a very interesting point, and I'm gonna make sure I get to the Catholics at some point here. Don't confuse me with a fan of the Catholic Church, because well, I'm about to get into their ills as far as what isn't known. Oh, there's plenty of ills that are known, right? But I'm going to get into the source of those ills that people don't have a clue about, and understanding the historical context is very important. And to that effect, one must understand why what you're looking at there, Crusadism, faded, then to take the form of colonialism. And to understand this, you need to understand why pooled investment relates to why Russian propaganda, why horde propaganda, left and right, has targeted Freemasons and secret societies in general. Secret societies being the ones who organized colonialism. The people who invested in these private, later to be corporations, but not corporations at first. Some actually would meet the definition of corporations based upon their internal structure, but they weren't just like established after the advent of a corporation when it was called a corporation, kind of. But there were liability limitations written into the partnerships. Anyway, I remember writing some. Well, colonialism makes a lot of sense once you understand how the church and how royal families were being simultaneously targeted. And at this period, roughly 1,000 years ago, these people who had used pseudo-populism versus military establishmentism to politically divide Rome itself, proceeded with these same tactics, just political and religious divide and conquer. And one of the most interesting things about history, as far as investigating it, once you learn this, once you learn that there is some mystery empire that we really haven't accounted for when we studied most of history, okay, is that this otherwise remote possibility that becomes encountered again and again as we analyze artifacts, as we analyze, archaeological sites and writings and tablets, and, whatever. There's a very small percentage chance, and not every instance, but a lot of instances, that these items were forged. And the reason why it's a small percentage chance is because if they were forged, they must have been forged contemporarily. And it's hard to understand. Who? Why would, one draws a blank. It's the same blank they drew on this map. It's the same blank they drew on this map. The blank has been drawn for you. By the Horde. You must understand, even if you don't believe directly in the spiritual component of this, that the summary alpha wave based psychological subconscious impact of what they have done generationally has effectively manifested in the form of what could easily be understood as a demon or as a legion of demons. And to really understand that, you just have to understand something that they've covered up on both sides. Whether it be far right or far left, one thing that they do not want you to believe in is reincarnation. It was at this time, after Jews, matriarchal societies, and then eventually the Templars were all exterminated from Europe. What you know of the Templars is at least 40% nonsense. There's some truth to what is said about them, but only enough to be used in their lies, just as the pattern seems to repeat. Even in the way they deceive Christians this day. So, to put it simply, you have a pretty obvious disparity of ideology. The Templars believed that John the Baptist was the Christ, that Peter and Paul were false prophets, the ones that Christ warned about, and that Mary Magdalene was the reincarnating goddess, which was the splitting of the incarnation of God. So if Christ is God, then goddess is the female form of Christ. Not Almighty God, but in order to become man, God took the side of the man that he created and breathed his life into, and created woman. And it is for that reason that a man should leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife, and that the two should become one flesh. The word is side, not rib. You see, this disparity, excuse me, this confusion of context that is actually very simple to understand. At this point, you had people who acknowledged the ancient ways in matriarchal society, and you had an entire horde that surrounded Europe that wanted Europe to be demolished, and they didn't. They didn't revere women. They thought it was evil to say that there could be anything that you could possibly construe as a goddess. And you became to have two groups of people, two basically political parties, if you will, in Europe. And one killed the other. All of them. Those murderers are who gave you this book, where instead of side it says rib. So take that into consideration when you decide to dismiss the ancient scriptures. And when it says anyone who would add to or alter to this is, damned. First of all, I would wonder what they are speaking in relation to. But other than that, I would agree with them. Yes. They have altered, deformed, and tainted the scriptures. And yes, they are, quite damned. As damned could be. The only ones really deserving of damnation. But not for that specific cause. But for the unified purpose that is the end that justifies that means, at least to them. It's a statement of truth, you see? But it's not some kind of booby trap in writing. It is the liars professing their guilt and their shame as they finalize their plagiarism. But, see this book? You still need this book. It is still the most valuable living tome in the world. Not because God spoke into some old guy's ears and was just like, write this word, then this word, then write this word, then this word. Just right up on his ear, like just getting it all foggy and hot. Write this word, then this word. It's kind of weird. I'm out of cigarettes, and that's kind of Bullshit. Honey, where'd you go? Hold on, I'm gonna go check the bedroom right quick. Foot is numb. Foot is numb. Numb foot. Foot numb. Ow. Oh wait. Let me get my green screen behind me. So anyways. Fuck. Can't just like continue speaking without like some kind of fidgeting thing in my hand. Say me shut off that square, cuz. What? Anyways. So you had Europe, okay, where white people lived until they were taken slaves by Eastern people and then sent back to conquer, or actually not entirely at first. They were, according to the archaeological digs that have been dated to the time of Attila's conquest in the right places of the battles that are written, Attila had warriors with wrapped, deformed, you know, like when they wrap them when they're babies and they deform them, right? Conehead looking motherfuckers. And when you see like Russian propaganda on YouTube and they talk about the Anunnaki and like, you know, I guess like that's like why Hillary Clinton's like a evil demon or something like that, because the Anunnaki and blah blah blah. I don't know. I don't even know anymore. This white girl just literally can't even. Those exact people, okay? That's where they come from. That's where they came from. A conquering us and to conquer. So, you know, even that same principle of like this percentage of truth just to tell a lie applies. I'm starting to wonder. I'm gonna turn my phone on right quick. Anyways, you know, it's kind of extra hard to remember what you're saying when you don't plan it out and you just basically pray for the wisdom. It's like, what was that thing that I didn't really mean to say to begin with? Oh, yeah. Like play it back the audio wise. Okay. No missed phone calls. So I shall murr at my murr and say murr. I think the word myrrh could be the key to relationship success. Let's see how far I can get on this ridiculous sidebar and get back to what I was saying, shall we? See, like, the word myrrh is what you say when there are no other words. It's reactionary but nonchalant. It's emotional but ambiguous, right? So instead of like saying where are you, which can come across brash, Mer? Excuse me, honey, I are confused as to your location. Oh. Interesting. So, myrrh. If you notice, if you look, you know, just lift a stone and you'll find me. Throughout ancient history and throughout many Templar-esque legends, folktales, histories, and pseudo-histories, the word myrrh, the suffix, root word, whatever, prefix, actually, is found quite frequently. And what you'll find is that all the ambiguous, seemingly, references that the universe and history have coincidentally provided, tell of stories, places, definitions, ideas, and acts that all sum up to the ways in which I use this word. It's very abstract, and it probably requires a step of faith before you can walk down this path of understanding. But, you know, like the consistent pattern of the muses, how they tell stories through all stories, this is something that can be, you know, tangibly accounted for. The same way you can tangibly account for the logical hypocrisy that comes from failing to understand the basics of history. And the basics of history are that there have been two major forces governing the ways societies interoperate with each other and the way people live together. One is where men and women are co-equal, and one is chauvinistic. And there allegedly have been reactionary, reverse chauvinistic establishments. One second. Getting really hard to maintain my train of thought at this point, but I'll manage. I have help. So this really simple, chartable, mappable, on the east bank, on the west bank, on this side, on that side, discernible, just easy to get thing is the reason why our society is divided, is the reason why there are simple mistranslations and simple failures of logical thought when it comes to understanding the Bible. And what makes the Bible so valuable as a tome isn't that God sat there and got his breath all up in some old guy's ear, being like, say this thing, say that thing, now write this thing, now write that word. This wasn't, from God's, old, really, really old God breath. How good could God's breath be, really? Okay.
Does he have licorice shirt? Because then it wouldn't be so bad.
I don't know, does he? Well, what makes it so valuable is that it tells a story, and it tells a deeper story. Because the story isn't just the words that are there, it's why those words are there. And it doesn't take a great deal of discernment, though it does take discernment. And on the part of those who are capable of discernment, it takes a great deal of irresponsibility and even animosity towards your brethren to fail to point out these things. These words are not infallible. They are alive.
That one was very important that I opened, and this one is too. I'm sorry.
She's making cute faces at me.
I love you. I was waiting for this. that I have another. I'm not. That's gonna be it.
Okay.
Everything else is junk.
Okay. Did you feel that?
It's not at all.
So anyways. Consider this. After this time, in which maybe one can presume there were survivors of the Hebrew genocides, the Magdalenian genocides, the matriarchal Celtic and Gaelic tribal genocides, the Inquisition. Oh yes, all the same time frame. If there were survivors, and just 2 or 3, you know, where 2 or 3 are gathered, I am there. If just 2 or 3 made it on to the final council, sorry, baby.
Sorry.
Baby.
I can't. Just do it one more time.
Now the kitten is distracting us. Okay. What were we talking about? The final council. Sorry. I'm done. Get my guitar out.
Oh.
And just completely segue. I mean, just completely sidetrack.
Lainey?
Alright. We're just getting all kinds of things accomplished today.
Yeah.
So, how nice that I have theme music for the thought that I was being distracted from. Anyways, I just want to make sure that's in all of your heads for the rest of the week, if possible. Or until you see, another Family Guy episode or something like that.
You're just froze now, aren't you?
Okay. I think we're okay now. And I apologize if you just went from Final Countdown to Tiffany. There's just not much coffee left. But I will make do. So if the survivals of these genocides, if Templars, if Templars existed within some of the Freemason lodges that were selected to refer to find the appropriate scholars, translators. Okay. If any people who kept the traditions of John and Mary, if any people who kept the knowledge of the chauvinist conquest of Europe secretly made it onto the council that King James commissioned to make this King James Translation Bible, which is, I believe, the second attempt at a English self-done translation, but the first really comprehensive one. Did you plug it in? Unplug it.
I accidentally hit the switch.
Okay.
I'll be back.
Okay. So, the merface is charging off with various colors of yarn, and
The neighbor's mama's birthday coming up, so I'm making the neighbor's mom a lap blanket.
piqued my curiosity. Lainey! Are you giving her that charger? What, like, what's
No,
the...
my phone's like really dead, and I don't want my phone to die, so I'm taking the charger. It fell off the couch.
Okay.
I'm taking it with me to go plug it in. I love you. No, she just...
Letting her play with it.
She took advantage.
It's a wire. You're not supposed to... Don't tear up the couch. Ah! Get it out. There you go. Just fucking tear up the plastic bag like you always do. So anyways, if just a few of these people, 2 or 3, made it on to the final council, they would all bust out with electric guitars and like fog machines and never mind. Fog machines. Good metaphor, actually. They would probably operate a lot like our national security establishment is today. You know, just a simple matter of give and give, as opposed to give and take. Support what you can. Support what you obviously shouldn't, because it is obvious. So that you have a say-so. Just play along. Let everybody else nickel and dime. Just so you can put your 2 cents in. And while they nickel and dime the truth, instead of being all dollar bill y'all like they should, I'm sorry, I apologize. There's not only this pattern of contradiction that fulfills the purpose of those who intended to destroy the West and to keep destroying the West and to keep dividing so that they could conquer the West. But it provides for people with faith who can see through the bullshit a clear evidence trail that provides suspect, location, means, and motive. And when it came to something like the word rib, being used instead of side, consider in the context of the time, when, you're talking about a bestseller here. We're talking about people who read this book are going to be reading it in its entirety. People who are going to be reading it immediately after these people are going to be very well-educated people, generally speaking. And those who aren't are going to be having this book available to them and nothing else. Just about. Surely, they would think their best strategy would have been to just say, you guys keep doing what you're doing there. Okay, rib. Yeah. Go ahead. Yes, rib. It must have been a rib. She was just a woman. Ah. Because the people at the time, would have watched that shit the way, geeks binge watch Star Trek on Netflix. Okay? They would have watched it comprehensively. They would have read it comprehensively. And you have plenty of people on the educated side of things, and even ministers required to educate themselves in these things, priests and clergy and whatnot, right? Even rabbis, friars. What do you call them? Abbots, friars. Yeah. They would all notice this word when they studied in the other language. A few people would have been, had their curiosity piqued here and there. Just no avoiding it, especially at that time, when most of the people who could read could also read Latin and Greek. That the word for rib is used 35 times in the Old Testament. And in every other instance is translated side. Now, it's interesting how after this time, after these slaughters, for a good long while, say until the advent of controllable information, it became less and less ladylike, less and less acceptable for women to be educated, to own property. It's funny how those two things are essential for passing down secrets. Well, here we have this day. From this same area that surrounded us. That tried to raise our cities to ashes. The Templars exterminated. Women suppressed. And this new translation that would be then translated from English into all other European languages. Now found agreeable to those who are conquering us. The unifying factor is chauvinism. The reason why the conquest stopped is because of this. This represents a secret treaty, if you will. It's a political compromise document. But because at this point, the people in Europe, the men in Europe, had lost so much of their esoteric understanding already, entire books were included that contain keys to unlocking the understanding of the entire contents. And namely, I mean Genesis and Revelation. And you will find nearly all the evidence required of what my truth's role in all of this is in those two books. But as for who these lessons should teach us to support these days, and who these lessons should teach us to watch out for these days, as for that truth itself, you don't have to look very far in your memory, let alone the books of Genesis and Revelation. There are a sentence in each that I'm sure would ring a bell. A few phrases put together gives complete comprehension. Once the keys are unlocked, once the mystery is revealed, once you simply understand the context of someone who, like the Gnostic scrolls say, remembers where they were before this life. Mystery, Babylon, mother of harlots and abomination. That's in Revelation. The other is, and I will put enmity between her and the serpent, and between her seed and the serpent's seed. And because of the word rib, you think that these refer to the same female. As if it could be that God were a man and the devil was a woman. You know, my mother was not a nice lady, but I still have not been such a victim of psychological infortitude that I have become so delusional as to think that women are lesser or evil in some way. The very idea that the universe would be established in such a manner, to me, is preposterous and illogical. And if you just realize that that makes sense, and your mother's still alive, why don't you just call her up and tell her you love her? Don't explain why. Just call her up and tell her you love her. Just say some random preacher suggested it and I decided to follow through. And she'll probably say, good preacher. Shh, don't tell her. So just a little bit of that context in the book of Genesis. You understand, a couple of basic things, like obviously Eve can fly. Wait, no, that's not a basic thing. Sorry. How else did she get the fruit from the tree? She had wings. Well, why didn't Adam have wings? Because he's a boy. I'm being silly, sorry. It's true, but I'm still being silly. Who committed the sin? Who was cursed? Was it Adam or Eve? And it was the serpent. The serpent who was more subtle than all of the creatures which the Lord God hath created. Subtle as in deceitful. And there are missing parts of this story. But we don't have to go into that to understand that the sin was not placed on Eve's shoulders. And we can clearly infer that there is some other female involved here. Because last I checked, asexual reproduction of evolved entities of any form is impossible. You know, the only person who can just divide themselves to incarnate is God. If you, little baby souls, get to the point where you can divide yourself and incarnate, you will do it on your own worlds. You're always welcome back here, but this is exceptional and muted and not defined in the Bible. So, not only do we have the clearly inferred context of another reproductive female through the words of his seed, okay, implying either that the snake is going to rape Eve or he's got his own mate. Okay, those are your two choices there. But it also says some things that chauvinists have been, you know, even more deceitful about. It says that she will have sorrow in childbirth. The word isn't pain, it's sorrow. And in fact, what one understands when they understand God is that God is not cruel. And to understand things that are said prophetically and then come true, one must understand the consequences of man's actions. If you have a God being cruel, chances are you have the wrong God in mind. And because of this knowledge of good and evil, there was no longer going to be an innocence to her seed. And that is why that free will came to cause her great sorrow. I mean, imagine yourself as a mother, if you are not one. You have two sons, and one of them kills the other. Does that qualify as prophecy fulfilled? Is that God's fault? Is that a curse? while it's the result of the plan that had to be to enable free will for God to take his hands off of things, basically, so that mankind could mature and develop, so that we could achieve communion with God. But you have the results of actions. You have consequences. It's just truth spelled out. It's right there. This is what's going to happen to you, babe. If you don't understand the context of love, you're not understanding the context of God. And, you know, a good parent can be pretty harsh, but not cruel. Ooh. Don't feel like my back's being properly supported here. Start my flare up. Anyways. So what do we know from Genesis about this other woman? Well, apparently the trail back to her is going to be through her children. And those children are going to be what? The children of the serpent. Okay, and if you look at it just metaphorically speaking, if you take the definitions of the words, if you think of these people as archetypes of those ideologies, which, given understanding, that's what one should do. You see that the serpent and his seed are deceivers. And Eve and her seed are the seed of life. And you see that from the beginning, the definition is written. Life itself has a nemesis, and that is deception. And interestingly enough, one of the things that it's very hard to account for as far as an evolutionary trait of mankind is deception. Especially when it comes to our ability to deceive ourselves, sometimes willfully. And this from the foundation of our DNA, you know, from the foundation of our history, from the foundation of our religion, at the very least. We have this idea written into us. The people who have tried to guide us have tried to teach us this. That deceiving yourselves will destroy yourselves, and that those who seek to destroy you are trying to deceive you. There is enmity between you and the woman. There is enmity between thy seed and her seed. So what do we know about deceivers? From that simple logical postulate, we know that deceivers don't like women very much. So what a coincidence that deceivers, chauvinists, are the same horde. In the book of Genesis, foundationally, from the very beginning, God's telling you, people who don't like women, people who want to use women, people who lie to women, are not to be trusted and are the enemy of the sons of Adam. And one need only turn to the additional literature to find that Cain, in the land of Nod, which does not mean wandering, it is a Mongolian word for look up, which is where you get the word nod from. It also means north. In many of the languages that had just been exterminated in Europe before this time. But you go ahead and put that word rib in there. And go ahead and put that word not in there. And you just think everything will be okay for you. So yeah, there was probably a couple of people on the council. On the final council. Sorry. But if not, that just goes to show you how stupid chauvinists can be when just left alone to their own devices. So, if one were to present himself as the truth, able to see the truth that could set you free, that could make the blind see, that could deliver you from evil, one would think that truth would reveal itself in the beginning and the end, in the Alpha and the Omega. And there we have that memorable phrase, in the end. Seems to be the one thing you can utter. That most people can identify what book it's in, if they will claim to have read the Bible. Even if they haven't read the whole Bible, they probably read that. They probably know where that is. Mystery Babylon, mother of harlots and abominations. It's usually written in all caps, like it's important or something. But it's a mystery. Think no further. God doesn't want you to know, right? If he wanted to know, he'd make a YouTube channel and tell you. I mean, hey, come down from a cloud and fart it into your brains or something. I don't know. Maybe you could put forth the effort of lifting a stone and just find the message underneath it. Maybe. Maybe then you'd realize that the stone itself was a message. Will the real Slim Shady please stand up? So some other phrases you should probably remember. Is that this harlot is riding a red dragon, which is then referred to as the nation of many waters. Now, if you read the Bible its entirety, if you take history into context and understand where, like Ezekiel 38, the nation is called down from the north, so that you will know I am the Lord. It's God saying, test me, and I will demonstrate my power in order to show the non-believer who I am. Oh, nail polish. Very important.
She got knocked my cord.
Well, after these references over and over again, nod. Kings of the North, armies of the North. Conquering to conquer. You have other identifying characteristics, like that they would deceive the world. Like the father of lies. Okay, so the most prolific liar, the most successful deceiver of our time, for instance, who would you say meets that criteria? Okay. Are you picturing him? He, the deceiver, would send the defiler to where? God's people. God's true people. In a time where there would be people, and it says it in the book of Revelation, that think they're God's people but aren't. They would be deceived, all of them. Father of lies? And the defiler. What a happy couple. So this nation of refugees that came from the lands that were being conquered, from the lands that had the tradition of equanimity between man and women, as opposed to enmity. You know, God's actual people. The defiler would come to do what to them? Defile. And, you know, if you can't really conceptualize what the word defile means, let me just ask you this question, and it'll bring it all to mind. Is this asshole worth it? Is it worth the stain on our integrity? The psychological damage to our young boys and girls who see this as a successful influence? Those poor unfortunate bulls. Sorry. They're being filled with all kinds of refuse. If one was to defile this nation, how would one do so more successfully? Well, that's in the Bible, dear. And that's something you blamed your mother for. How dare you? Now you got to understand that this nation of many waters is easily identifiable throughout history. In fact, during this time period, we had referred to it for its activities over the previous 1,000 years as the nation of many waters. So when you read in context, in the English language, in the King James Version, the nation of many waters, this is literally what they're referring to. The horde. So many handy little rivers. So many connections to, even at that time, even if one discounted the Siberian Khanate, you know, that little blind spot, right? Just forget that whole area to the north. Doesn't mean anything. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Pay no attention to the tribe that actually owned Genghis Khan. So let that sink in for a second. Many waters, conquering and to conquer. Harlots and abominations. You ever, like, noticed internet porn? What's with the photoshopping the penises on the... Never mind. That's just what Russians do in their free time for some reason. Why? Because they're a bunch of sick fucks. And the ones who aren't are known as the opposition. Those are the sons of Noah and of Thracians and of Polish people, Ukrainians and honorable Cossack tribes that refuse to be slaves to this force that tries to destroy humanity. And they don't know what they're really up against. But at least they understand it better than we Westerners. Certainly the Ukrainians do. And again, the reason why Trump supporters aren't as naive, aren't as foolish as people who support Putin is because they, like the opposition, like the Ukrainians, have a simple grasp of history. And know what it means when a man seeks power and attacks women in power and attacks the freedom of the press. Attacks the truth. Apparently he's attacking my cup of coffee. Alright, hold on. I still got more to do, so I'm going to have to take a little breaksy poo here. And then, hi Joey, hi Carlos, hi Mr. Conway again. And I'm going to get to the comments and chats and puddin' pops as soon as I decide that I've finally finished making my point. You think I've made my point yet? Have I made my point? I think I made my point. Right and left they come to conquer us. And anyone would be a fool for believing anything that they say just for that. But then if you simply know the historical context of the world, if you simply know the historical context of the Bible, if you simply know the truth, you should not, cannot, and will not support this. Thought I was just gonna pour myself a cup of coffee right quick, but then my bladder activated as soon as I stand up, so now I have to put on music. No. You know what? I'm just gonna play a different song. If anybody has a request, get it in really, really quickly. Time for our musical intermission. I'll try to make it quick, so I'm going to try to do a short song about that.
Can't take. Swallowing hay as I wait, but what for it? It's too late. I still love my evil twin. 1,000 tears my love, 1,000 tears my hate, millions more with your blood red. This pain that I can't take. Gave wings to a crippled bird. Glaring eyes, spoiled demise, and I made a world he dies. 1,000 tears for my love, 1,000 tears for my hate, millions more with your blood red. This pain that I can't take. 1,000 tears for my love, 1,000 tears for my hate, millions more with your blood red. This love no one else can take.
Literally just sat down with my coffee. Oh, good timing, but I had to stub my toe to accomplish it. But fucking toe gets stubbed so many times, I can't even tell if there's any damage. It hurt for a second there, though. Hurt pretty good. Now, nothing. Okay, we're good. Oh, this coffee, however. This coffee. I need to stir it. Oh, I am not a fan of the $8 coffee pot at Walmart. It does not keep the coffee well after a couple hours. It turns off after 2 hours, which is, I guess, a good thing, but you definitely want to have enough sugar in that shit, or you may be traumatized. So yes, I apologize. I did hide the chat window from myself because of the morons. Because I thought I was on a pretty good rant there, and I shouldn't have to read what he says to rebut him. And I don't think I did. Would y'all at least agree, because I didn't get to see what he said, Mr. Conway, that I pretty much effectively contradict anything that he said? Or should I explain this photograph again? Let's see here. Just going through my images, and now that we've effectively burnt the troll by identifying the people who burnt the witches. Anyways, it's not a serpent, actually. It's a word that denotes his species and level of wisdom. But it's interesting that the ones who would resurrect the tradition of the fallen, or Setitism, should, make that association and seem to revere the serpent. But, one must bear in mind also the practicality and the manner in which the Genesis 1 story is told to children. Okay? If something helps them to prepare in a way that could save their life while they're doing their chores as children, learning how deceitful a snake can be, and one bite'll kill you, you know? Lesson worth keeping around, right? I think. Experiencing ventilation problems. Speaking of that area over there, whatever happened to it's just not there anymore. Yeah, it's up there. Okay. Whatever. Fish tank. Anyways, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, man. I've never had a snake sneak up on me, but I had a cousin got bit by a copperhead while he was fucking just doing hedge trimming. Just hedge trimming with you know, the hedge trimmer. Electric one, I think. And just got bit right on the fucking forearm. Didn't even see the snake until it had bit him. So that phrase, you know, if it was a snake, it would have bit me. Oh, that always made clear sense to me. Yeah, like my cousin Stevie's arm. Or was it Leon? I don't even remember who it was. I just remember their fucking arm bleeding. And I know it was my cousin because I know where I was, and that was a place where I meet my cousins. You know, like, you know, you got that place where you go and you meet your cousins. That was one of them places for me. What the hell? Zoom and the 6-line wrasse were just like going like this to each other, almost like they were kissing. Like, I don't know if that was some kind of territorial thing or what. It was hilarious. I wish I had the camera pointed at that take at that point. That, wow. We only did it for a brief couple of seconds, but never seen that before. A wrasse and a percula clownfish, like, going within millimeters of each other. Almost like they're kissing. Not quite touching. What the fuck is that? 30 years, never seen that. And again, didn't have a 6-line wrasse. Stomping the head to bring the correct antidote. There you go. Yep. Makes perfect sense to me. If a snake bites you, you better kill that motherfucker. Is that where the idea of a witch's brew comes from? When they would just take the animal that bit you and make like an herbal, you know, nice, salty, reinvigorating, cleansing type broth with the snake and its skin, everything but the venom, basically. Eyeballs and all. They tell you to make sure you eat the eyeballs. A good mother would dice them up for you. Back before you understood anything, that'd be the obvious way to try to remedy a snakebite situation. It's hilarious to think, I wonder if it worked. Hair of the dog that bit you. There you go. Oh. Snakeskin stew. So anyways, let me see. Yachiru, are you still there? Oh, I see. It got borderline interesting. Who? I'm sick of your crazy nonsense. Goodbye. James! What's up, brother? Oh, jeez. Come back with another fucking... Come back with another screen name, and another screen name, and another screen name. Yachiru, is that Emily? Am I on live chat or top chat? Should be on live chat. Oh, I'm on top chat. Fuck. Apologies. I had said that before, but I think I had to change channels. Oh, and now all that bullshit is gone. And so is Yachiru's. Okay. That's interesting. Still there? Yep. my stomach is still kind of fucking with me. So I'm sorry if I'm just like spacing off every now and again. It's like, this bullshit coffee is not really helping. No, didn't you just see she was still there? Huh. Alright, so here we have another lovely proof of the active suppression measures that are being applied through Google, through YouTube, to me, just to my channel, disabling people from being able to interact with me unless they have made tremendous effort to do so. I just switched this from top chat to live chat, and there was a friend who was using the screen name Yachiro Kasajichi, I think, and screen name from Bleach, a character. And when I switched it back to live chat, despite the fact that the people she was arguing with, or the person she was arguing with, who was able to repeatedly re-enter the chat room with multiple screen names, as usual with this particular Russian troll hacker, Google employee, whoever the fuck they are, rather than just their comments disappearing and her comments remaining, all of her comments disappeared as well. And apparently, according to the other moderator here, she is currently, from her end, seeming to be blocked from further comments. So, isn't that special? So, if I were to try to recap myself and see if there was any one unanswered question that remained, that would be, what happened to the other bitch? Well, this is something that is not exactly hard to figure out. You see, if you pierce the little wall that was built around us 1,000 years ago, and you go into the darker sides of horde cultures, you find many telling tales. In fact, there are few ancient mythos that lack at least aspects of this particular theme. And that is of an evil goddess and a pure of heart hero and a pure of heart little priestess virgin or something like that. Some star-crossed lovers. Or an evil goddess who usurps the true goddess and then has a son, and that son rules the earth. Over and over again. Different aspects of this same story show up here and there. And the further you go into time, the further you go into areas that were conquered later and unconquered and even kept mysteries in mountains, the further you go in that direction, the more you find this story of one goddess usurping the other. And isn't that what you have? You have the convolution. You have people today, the deceivers, the people who want to oppress women, children of the serpent, trying to convolute these two figures, trying to have their goddess usurp the true goddess. Well, if you look through all these ancient histories and mysteries, you can find that this evil goddess has motivations and character, and she can be defined psychologically. She can be tracked by that profile. And some of the things that she likes to do is say that she has every name, she has many names, she, professing herself as a conqueror, but then also taking upon herself the role and the identity of a man, time and time again throughout history, and even in her, even in the writings of those that revered her. And you have, let's see, what was my little image that I was just looking at? There we go. Dueling characteristics that when it all comes down to it, understanding the difference between these two figures is as simple as understanding the difference between lust and love. And not just when it pertains to interactions between man and woman, Talking about politically, talking about sociologically, the difference between lust and love, and how you treat other people and how you think for yourself. People who are willing to give up on logic and reason are generally doing so to get something out of it, whether it be some sort of compensation or simply comfort. Now that right there is considered to be a male deity by the name of Sobe. Nope. You see,
I still gotta do the nails, but pretty. I did it in honor. Is there something that can get you that will make you feel better?
I don't know.
Let me
I'm
get
just going to try drinking some more juice, I guess.
well, we have to go back out later tonight when Bobby gets home anyway, so I'll pick up some juice.
Types,
Yeah, I'm gonna get a bunch of those when I go later, but we're waiting until he gets home from work before we guys would take her car since they got more gas than I do.
Cool.
Alright, I'll be back.
Love you.
Love you too.
Okay, so just starting with the basics of Egyptian mythos, you have the clearly defined interchangeable incarnations before the second dynasty or whatever, when it was considered to be mostly a male thing after that, right? Your boss is on the tell, yeah? Cool. But you had in the, what would you say, the lesser pantheon, the constant search for understanding based on the changing of the eyes and the thrones. And that meant that the spirits of the original primal forms of gods, represented by their eyes, their symbolic eyes, would pass down through these later rulers. And it was because of that mythology that they considered their pharaohs and later rulers to be incarnations of gods and goddesses. And this is Sobe, right? But you have the lion, hippo, crocodile configuration. Okay. Yeah, I know what a telly is, Conway. Jeez. It's real TV as opposed to fake TV. But see, the thing about lustful women, think about whores, okay? Especially back in the day. Is that they required the ability to intentionally miscarry a child. Okay? And I'm bear with me. What you'll find, and I don't know if medical science has terminology for this or has even noticed this, is that when a woman gets multiple abortions, she tends to have a thickening of the arms. Okay? It can happen for other reasons, but I'm talking disproportionately. And it seems to me, and this is based on women that I've known, okay, that representations that were denoted in mystery and understanding to be, easily interpretable as incarnations in a male form of a goddess, or incarnations of a goddess that ruled like a man, that acted like a man, would be embodied by statues with what I saw to be a recognizable form. And that is a feminine figure with a flat chest and thickish arms. And that's what I see there in Sobek. I see a feminine figure with a flat chest and abortion arms. If you look closely, they're not muscular, And of course, I'd be fascinated to inspect many statues for why some that would be descendants of the goddess just seem to have kind of a bland area right there, whereas clearly defined men seem to have pectoral muscles. And the headdress is usually made to accent the pectoral muscles as opposed to something that looks like it's meant to dangle over titties. Titties. What? Oh, shit. Titties! Anyways. Thought what was an Irish thing? Titties? No, titties are universal. Oh. No, that's generally just a British all-around thing. Anyone who's watched Monty Python or, BBC should be able to understand. So anyways, I feel like crap again, because I'm getting hungry again, but I have cookies now, and cookies make everything better. So, anybody else got any questions or comments or anything else I need to finish up. Splitting one's soul. That is the choice that one has when they achieve communion with God. And this is generally done in two forms in tandem, as it was in the beginning, in which that man and woman come to populate their own reality through similar means. But in the same way that, you know, God takes hiatuses, the challenge, the price, if you will, though not really a contractual agreement, is that I have one anemone that's being hidden by the other anemone, and it's kind of annoying me, distracting me. The challenge is to do it all again. So, with understanding, an ascended being, one that has achieved communion with God, would not create their own world to rule it. They would create it to experience it and again achieve communion with their own progeny. And they would send themselves back into their world, and they would return here, even. So anyways, one of my rose bubbles had been stretching out quite nicely. Alright, I've turned on the lamp in here to see if I can get it to stretch out forward. I cleaned the glass and maybe I can get it to want to go back where it was. Let's see here. This anemone down here usually stretches up on the side of this anemone. But as you can see, this anemone is getting huge because it's got the better zooxanthellae content and is able to live off of sunlight better, or live off of the light better than the other one is able to. So this could be an adjusting period, but this could be a decline. And I got to stay watchful and make sure that anemone doesn't seem to be shrinking over the next few days. Because otherwise, dried and frostbitten or not, I'm going to have to feed it what's remaining of my rod's food. I had gotten to the point where they were growing without being fed. And, all the other coral I keep is nice, but one of my main goals is to be able to propagate anemones. So, that's why I have the tremendously expensive lighting set up on there. Anyways. Sorry. Always forget to remove that before moving on. But anyways, so it looks like it's about time to call it a broadcast, people. I thank you very much for watching. And, well, hope we all learned something. Y'all take it easy, but don't take it all. See y'all probably tonight. Peace.
Thank you.